Let go, damn it! Get Clem and the others out of here!
Lee.
Lee, you both know. Let me go.
If there was one character that I would have to pick in Telltale's The Walking Dead that was the most realistic, my choice would be Ben. I know a lot of people would argue that Kenny should fill that slot, in which I would agree, but I feel as though Ben as a character throughout the episodes has had a slight edge in terms of realism. So for today, I want to explain and show you guys why I think Ben is the most realistic character in Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1. Now, starting in Episode 2's Starved for Help, we get to see Lee, Mark, a new member in the group, and later on Kenny trying to hunt down food due to having low rations due to being held down at the motor inn for 3 months. As Lee and Mark are in the midst of hunting, they hear loud screaming coming from within the woods.
Shit, was that Kenny?
Thinking that it's Kenny at first, they run towards the wailing noise, eventually meeting with 2 students, Travis and Ben, as well as their teacher Mr. Parker, who was unfortunate enough to be caught up in a bear trap that was hidden within the woods. Not too long we see Kenny arrive with Mark and Lee, and overall everyone comes to a consensus to hold the walkers off to buy time to get Mr. Parker out of the bear trap. But unfortunately, the fate of Mr. Parker is not too bright because we end up finding that he or Travis lose too much blood when bringing them back to the motor inn. With this, as Katja explains the cause of death, gets attacked by the now walker, this being either Mr. Parker or Travis, being saved by Lee and eventually killing the walker, the group collectively get confused as to why the body turned into a walker in the first place. With this is really the moment where we meet Ben as he explains that if you don't destroy the brain, despite not being bit, that you still turn.
It's not the bite that does it. You come back no matter how you die. If you don't destroy the brain, that's just what happens. It's gonna happen to all of us.
All infected? Everyone?
I guess so. I don't know. All I know is that I've seen people turn who I know were never bitten.
But if you go further, you would know that his full name is Ben Paul, a student who during the beginnings of the outbreak came down from Stone Mountain for the playoffs.
I'm Ben Paul. The man you saved is Mr. Parker, the band director at my school. We all came down from Stone Mountain for the playoffs when everything happened.
As far as episode 2 goes for Ben's character, we don't really get to see much besides him giving small comments about not liking strangers, and overall from his body language and his actions we see that he's more passive and gets startled quite easily. But where we really start to see his character being more real is in episodes 3, Long Road Ahead. In episode 3, we see Lee and Kenny scavenge for supplies. Finished, the duo head back to the motor inn to inform Lily about the supplies they've gathered. Eventually though, they get into a conversation about supplies being missing from the group and that from Lily's words that a trader has been taking things of high quality. With this, Lily tells Lee to investigate. Lee ends up finding the supplies in a grate. Lily goes on to suggest lining everyone up, but before that, bandits arrive asking for more. Lily sneaks to the top and ends up taking the first shot, taking out the first bandit, which then follows up with an all-out war with the group and the bandits until Kenny gets the RV running to escape the motor inn, in which they succeed. While on the road, Lily tries to pry into Ben and Carly to see whether one of them or both were the reason as to why the bandits came to the motor inn. Both of them obviously denying the claims. They tried to settle the problem on the side of the road due to a walker getting caught up in the RV. Long story short, Lily ends up shooting Carly for a remark she made, which in turn Lee decides to either leave Lily or let her stay in the RV. Question is, how does this all have to do with Ben? Well, we find out that Ben was the reason behind as to why the bandits came to the motor inn in the first place, as he was the one sneaking supplies to keep the bandits from coming to the motor inn. The thing that makes his character being very realistic is him being cowardly and nervous while also trying to be nice at the same time, which for someone his age and the apocalyptic environment makes a lot of sense. So him being the outlier of not having that self-confidence in himself is fitting. But where the realistic factor comes into play is that he makes a lot of mistakes. So much that it costed other people's lives as well as his own. The whole situation with the bandits could have been resolved by Ben simply telling the group about the situation. Sure, he may have gotten some slack for it, kicked out of the group, or killed, which is unlikely, but you get the idea. But due to the fact that he wanted to see if the bandits had his friend and him simply being afraid, caused practically the whole group to fall apart.
They said they had my friend, that he was with them. By the time I realized they didn't, it was too late. They said they'd kill me. Kill all of us. I'm sorry, Lee.
Carly ends up dying due to Ben not telling the truth and being afraid of the outcome of being alone and possibly dying. He indirectly ends up killing Duck, who got bitten because of the raid, indirectly caused Katja to die because of her not being able to deal with her son's death, as well as Lily being gone. With the aftermath of these poor choices, you can see Ben physically and mentally deal with his actions as he's more sad throughout the rest of episode 3. But his mistakes don't end there, as in episode 4 there are also a few more poor choices he makes. For example, like leaving Clementine with a group of walkers while the group was in Savannah, which this choice is one of, if not the main key factor as to why people dislike Ben so much, which also by the way ended up killing Chuck since he stood up to protect Clementine, but ended up getting killed and left down in the sewers. And another being where he took the hatchet away from the door handle that was blocking the walkers from getting inside the school building when the group was scavenging for supplies in Crawford, which also indirectly killed Bree, a member of Vernon's group, while trying to block the door from walkers due to Ben bringing them in. Afterwards, you don't really see too much of Ben making a very poor choice. Really, there's only 3 scenes that I would like to discuss that I feel need to be talked about that are important to discuss about his character. 1, Lee having the choice to let go of Ben from him being caught upon the bell tower due to a walker. 2, the scene where Ben tells Kenny off outside the mansion. And 3, the scene where Ben is dying in the alleyway after getting impaled. These I will come back to talk about very soon. As I mentioned, the multiple things of what Ben has done so far and the poor choices he's made up until this point are very much valid reasons to dislike the character. But your reasoning to dislike the character is what makes the guy so realistic and well written. This teenage kid that was heading to the playoffs to have fun unfortunately found out about the outbreak, and now having to deal with it has been on the run ever since for 3 months. Having to be in camps, but was ultimately attacked by the Raiders that we see in episode 2, doesn't know anything about whether his parents or his sister are even alive to begin with. His friend and his teacher end up dying in front of him, and now he's in this new group of people he doesn't know, and is now trying to be a help and compensate for the group, but almost every instance of him trying to do just that, he screws it up by hindering the group in some way or getting someone killed. It makes sense for Ben to lack confidence and ultimately be scared because he's been on the run the whole time and also doesn't have anyone left. You see him mention not wanting to be alone when being confronted by Lily when they were on the side of the road after the attack from the Raiders.
We don't need all these votes! What do I have to do for you to trust me? I'll do anything! I'll do watches for months.
Ha, the hell you will.
I'll get more food, more medicine, anything.
You think any of that is good now?
Just let me stay, please! God, please!
You're making it worse on yourself.
I just don't want to be on my own.
You should have thought of that.
Also, his age does play a part, not just with the lack of experience on really how to deal with stressful situations, but also the fact that because he's young, most of the group, and by most, mainly Kenny, give off hints that neglect Ben of really speaking his mind. Having that sense, how would you know, you're just a kid mentality. So combine that feeling with knowing majority of the things that you do sabotages the team in some way leads to the 3 things I mentioned, starting with the bell scene. In this scene, for context, the group escaped from one of the rooms after being pinned by a group of walkers due to Ben grabbing the hatchet from the door handle. The group goes up the stairs within the bell tower towards the very top and decide to escape through the window via ladder. As the bell starts to ring, a walker is connected with the bell, and so the walker grabs hold of Ben since he was nearby. Lee shoots the walker and grabs hold of Ben's arm last second. Now Lee has 2 choices, either let go of Ben or pull him up. But the thing with this scene which makes it pretty sad is the fact that Ben wants to die. You see that he puts no effort and intentionally tries to fall. He even tells Lee that they both know that Ben has been essentially a liability to the group. What makes the scene tough to see is not the intention of him wanting to die, but the fact that Ben believes that for him to be truly useful in this situation or in general would be to not be in the group at all. What we just went over with, Ben hindering the group and his past and all, makes sense as to why he would do what he did. Second part is Ben telling Kenny off outside of the mansion in episode 5. This scene takes place after the group find out that Vernon and the patients took the boat for themselves. The scene only happens if you decide to keep Ben alive after Crawford. Now I firmly believe that having Ben alive in the group after the Crawford incident makes the story even more interesting to watch, because in this moment this scene of Ben actually deciding to stand up for himself is really the only instance in the entire game where Ben shows growth in his character. In the conversation, Ben apologizes to Kenny for what happened to his family, but at the same time explains that he's not the only one going through problems, as he doesn't even know whether his family is alive, and he'll probably never know since he's been on the run the whole time. But overall really emphasizes on telling Kenny to lay off.
It was dead. No! You know how they die. You've said goodbye. I never got to see my family, my parents, my little sister. Do you get that? Your family is gone, but at least you had them to lose. I never made it home. They could be alive, or dead, or walkers, or worse, and I don't know! So give me a fucking break!
What's unfortunate though is that the moment that Ben shows growth in his character, not too long afterwards he ends up dying. Which leads to the third scene. Now in this scene, the group, after defending against the walkers in the mansion and being stuck in the attic, managed to find their way out. The group ultimately decided to travel via rooftop to get to River Street.
Looks like we can stay off the streets all the way to River Street if we're careful.
Let's go.
Everyone takes their turn and make it across except for Ben, who falls in the alleyway and gets impaled through the stomach. This scene is very important because it shows you how much of an influence Ben has been to the group, where in hindsight they all knew that Ben was a scared kid at the end of the day. Even Lee himself mentions this.
Kenny made sure that Ben didn't feel any more pain than he had to.
What?
It was Ben's biggest fear, you know. Kenny had one bullet and that's how he used it. God, poor fucking kid.
Of course, Kenny also knows, which is why he decides to risk his life to help him, as well as Kristen and Omid, who I wouldn't doubt thought similar things. I think it's fair to say that majority of people that played Season 1 of The Walking Dead have disliked Ben in some sort of fashion, me included. Despite him doing some very poor choices in decision making, going back and really looking at his character makes a lot of sense. It's hard to really blame him for his actions when in his situation, I feel as though plenty of people would do things very similar to Ben, showing that realism, trying to figure out what to do in this new environment and pretty much find out how to survive without having anybody but himself to look out for. At the end of the day, Ben was just a scared young kid that wanted to be safe as much as he can, but in the end wasn't strong enough to live with the horrors of the apocalypse.